Welcome to Wednesday, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and being on time here this morning. It will be a remarkable day. The Jamaicans for Justice will be sharing with us their findings of the State of Justice report. And I'm Danielle Archer. I will navigate you through the proceedings here this morning. But we have some timekeepers around the back, so I'm going to wait for them to tell me that it's okay for us to go ahead. We're good to go? Excellent. So that's a start. So you will recognize that during these proceedings, we're trying to make sure that we complete the presentations on time. So we have timekeepers at the back. So they're going to keep us going so we can get you out of here in time to do the other things that you have to do. It is my distinct pleasure to be here, and I'd like to specially welcome, on behalf of the Board of Directors of Jamaicans for Justice and their Executive Director, we should be joined in a few minutes by the Honorable Minister. I will wait for her arrival. In the meantime, His Excellency Ambassador Luis del Solar. Special good morning as well to Country Ambassador for UNAIDS, Mr. Richard Amenya. Members of our distinguished panel, thank you so much for agreeing to join us this morning. Commissioner Mr. Hugh Faulkner, thank you for being here, sir, of the Independent Commission of Investigations. Rear Admiral Harley Lewin, former Commissioner of Police and former Chief of Staff of the Jamaica Defense Force, and Professor Anthony Harriott. Haven't seen him yet. He should be joining our panel this morning. He, of course, is the director of the Institute of Criminal Justice at the University of the West Indies. We have representatives from our donor agencies as well. Without you, this certainly would not be possible. Thank you so much for being here. To all our guests that are here in the Talk of the Town, and to those of you who have joined us by YouTube and Instagram, and to our listeners on Nationwide News Network, thank you for sharing your morning with us. And thank you so very much, Madam Minister, who's now here, the Honorable Marlene Malahoo Foote, Queen's Counsel, JP, MP, and Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. She'll be addressing us this morning. I think, though, before we commence the proceedings formally by inviting our Executive Director to share with us, I think we need to acknowledge a universal truth. And that universal truth is that here in Jamaica, not everyone is treated equally. And sadly, most of us are aware that how you're treated by the system is often determined by your status in society, your education level, how you look, where you work, and many times, even the color of your skin. We have an adage here in Jamaica that says, donkey said the world no level. It's true. The world isn't level. And it doesn't mean that we're all treated equally. And it is precisely because of that, that you have an entity like Jamaicans for Justice, who, through their advocacy and their actions, ensure that the playing field gets as level as possible. And in an era of states of emergencies, the suppression of rights and freedoms, that's been on everybody's agenda, at least most persons. But the question is, who are the persons most affected? And are they entitled as well to the protection of law? Do you remember Gavin Noble? I hope you do. He spent 458 days in a Negro police station and was only released when the court ordered that he be released. And I trust your memories have not faded with respect to Noel Chambers. He gripped the nation when we recognized that for 40 years, he was detained at the pleasure of the Queen, without a trial, a stark reminder of the impact of poor administration, the impact of inadequate food, and inadequate healthcare. I raise that because these gentlemen remind us that they represent hundreds of detainees whose dignity are often ignored by state actors. So perhaps your presence here this morning at the launch of JFJ's annual report will cause you to face this universal truth, that even in prisons, those who reside in our correctional facilities are equally entitled to the protection of the Constitution. It is in the wake of this truth and a recognition of the state of inequality that JFJ has received more than 600 reports of human rights violations in the past 2 years. So in this summit, You will receive information about the nature and the extent of the violations, who are the persons most impacted, and the architects of the violations. So I'll invite Ms. Michael Jackson, JFJ's Executive Director, who will take my place right here, and she will share with us her opening remarks for 9 minutes on the state of justice, examining human rights and the rule of law in Jamaica. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you so much, Ms. Archer. Distinguished guest, Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, the Honorable Marlene Malahoo Fort, Excellencies, the media, colleagues, friends, welcome. Now, COVID-19 would have gripped the nation for the past 2 years, and several events had to be held virtually. But I'm certainly happy that we're able to meet face-to-face and offer some sort of mixed modality, because we are, in fact, joined by colleagues and friends online, and I want to extend my appreciation for them watching and joining in this event that we are undertaking this morning. My name is Michael Jackson, and it is an honor to be called to this mandate as Executive Director of this noble organization, Jamaicans for Justice. And the honor is to assist with ensuring access to justice for many marginalized Jamaicans. I want to acknowledge and really extend my appreciation for the courage and achievements of my predecessors, some of whom include Dr. Caroline Gomes, Horace Levy, who should be here with us today, and most recently, Roger Malcolm. We also acknowledge the board and the members for their guidance and their support. Their collective activism and formidable leadership have advanced the cause of human rights in this country and have brought great access and impact to the communities and beneficiaries served by Jamaicans for Justice. We have a proud legacy, over 20 years legacy of justice, this JFJ, this Jamaicans for Justice, and we have truly become the spokesperson for those who are voiceless, the victims of human rights violations. And for those who were able to speak strongly and with resilience, but needed that force to help amplify their call, JFJ was able to lend such support. We're here today to present the findings of our State of Justice report. And it would be remiss of me, though this is the opening remarks, not to extend my sincere gratitude to the small staff at JFJ. We have less than 15 persons, but I tell you, they work hard and they really put in the effort for this report. Now, this event is here to have conversations about the findings of the report, but it's not just to present the findings, it's to have dialogue around proposed legislative and policy reforms to ensure that as we tackle crime, to ensure that we tackle the issues in Jamaica, we are doing so with human rights principles in mind. And I really want to acknowledge the government of Jamaica, because the last 2 years did see several legislative movements taking place. For example, we would have had the Data Protection Act, the Sexual Harassment Prevention and, Protection and Prevention Act, my apologies, those laws coming into force. And again, we extend our gratitude to the government for their leadership. We also know that the government would have made different amendments to crime-fighting legislation, such as the commonly referred anti-gang legislation. JFJ would have had input on that in previous years, and we're happy that it seems to be providing the kind of outcome that we would want in tackling the gang violence in the country, and we look forward to improvement where and as necessary. Despite these advancements, however, 2021 saw the state of justice in Jamaica reflecting serious human rights violations. Ms. Archer would have spoken to some of them, and we have the others outlined in our report, such as the issue of people being taken up without cause, simply because of who they are. And it's something that we raise strong objections to. The crime levels in Jamaica, especially the murder rate, remains much too high. And I think this is something that all us Jamaicans, we share a cause for concern about. Last year, we would have seen the murder rate, for example, being 1,463 lives being snuffed out. We are outraged by it. All of us should be, certainly. And we know that the JCF would have included and noted that all other major crime would have seen a reduction. Nevertheless, the levels are far too high for us to take any comfort in that. JFJ does not underestimate the challenges faced by police officers when confronting criminality. And we note that 12 officers would have lost their lives in the course of their duties, and we extend our condolences to their family members. We also recognize that the task facing the Jamaican police is further challenged given the need for more resources, increased wages, and the necessary psychosocial support. And I think it's important that I pause and I use this opportunity to clarify a common misconception about the role of JFJ and how we feel about interacting with the police force. We support the police. Absolutely, we do. We stand in unison with the good men and women of the force. Want to be very clear around that. However, we cannot stand with those who break the law and challenge the very humanity of our Jamaican citizens. It is on that basis that JFJ offers strong condemnation towards those who step outside the law. And I think we should all do the same. We have the families of victims who were killed. They are left grieving. They are left in their struggles for justice. And it's on that reason that JFJ is unapologetic about our position on certain things. And we ask government officials, us all as Jamaican citizens, to offer public denunciation of these serious human rights violations. It is a call that the victims, the families, such as Fabian Reyes, Nakia Jacksons, and Mario Deans, have been asking for. The thousands of persons who were detained under the state of public emergency without due process also made that call. In a 2021 report to the government, Indicom stated that some 35 officers await trial for murder, manslaughter. However, whilst charged, the court process towards prosecution is much too slow. And when we look at the conviction rates of officers who are involved in taking the lives of Jamaican citizens, that is also much too low. As stated earlier, the war and crime is an issue that affects all Jamaicans, and it requires a collective effort and input. Nevertheless, if in addressing crime, we proceed with an assumption of guilty until proven innocent and apply it to persons on the basis of where they come from, what they wear, how they look, how much money they make, the color of their skin, we would have lost everything that we were fighting for as a nation. The task that the government face, simply, it is difficult. We understand that, and again, we recognize the challenges. We are sympathetic, we are supportive, and we are here to provide support whenever the government calls on us and needs it. Though challenged, however, those in leadership must always ensure the rights of citizens are protected and principles of our democracy is upheld. It is for that reason that JFJ was in fact concerned last year around the hyperbolic utterances that would have been made around proposed legislation that would see the death penalty imposed for gun offenses. We say that any imposition of the death penalty would not only be a regressive step in a maturing democracy, but one ultimately would see no reduction in crime and crime control. Also, while we welcome legislative reforms for crime management, the proposed harsh penalties and mandatory minimum sentencing for illegal possession of firearms, in our estimation, may very well disproportionately affect the marginalized young people, some of whom are being recruited for gangs, some of whom would have lost their opportunities for education. In our estimation, we believe that removing the court's discretion for determining appropriate punishment without considering the facts of the case or the circumstances of the offender is a cause for concern and may very well undermine the very thing that we're trying to achieve. The late Kofi Annan of the United Nations noted, governments have to show courage and vision to look beyond themselves to find solutions and put in place new frameworks and rules. We therefore call on the government to commit to an end to the usage of extraordinary executive and policing powers as crime-fighting strategies. We believe that is something that should be strongly rejected and condemned. In our estimation at JFJ, the time has come for effective police and judicial reforms, such as protecting witnesses from intimidation, providing the Special Coroner's Court with the necessary resources to see swift action for justice. The time has come for the elusive body-worn cameras to be provided to the police to ensure that there is accountability for their actions. The families that are here, the victims that are here, they deserve transformational leadership and a radical change in the culture of the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Far too often, impunity persists, and we must call an end to that. At this point, community safety and security approach, engaging with those within the communities, are critical. In our estimation, if reform is to really take place, those who are elected or appointed to lead the country must garner the political will that is necessary, for example, to see INDECOM getting their prosecutorial and arrest powers that would have been recommended from the 2015 Joint Select Committee report. The government must demonstrate its commitment to human rights by the way of constitutional or statutory safeguard for agencies that exist to keep the state accountable. And again, I'm happy that Minister is here who will give us an update on the National Human Rights Institution. I'm sure you know that JFJ, we have a vested interest. So thank you again for joining us, Minister. And I just want to let us all know that JFJ notes that accountability is important, and we know that getting to that stage, it requires us all taking a role in openness, collective agreements, and coordinated actions. But certainly the time for action is here. We must move beyond words and really get things done. To the Jamaican people who are listening, stand up, speak up, be outraged about injustices. It is important that we all have that voice. JJ will continue to be the voice of the most marginalized, be their strong defender, in complete objectivity, without fear or favor, and we urge the government to protect and promote human rights without distinction. JFJ, we stand resolute in our position as the people's champion. Thank you so much.
Violence is not allowed, so I won't beat up the executive director for going over time this morning. I appreciate her comments, the position that she has shared with us, asking for radical change in the JCF and perhaps even throwing down the gauntlet to say we perhaps need much more than talking, we need more action at this time. The executive director mentioned the National Institute of Human Rights. It is on the agenda of JFJ, and I believe the Minister of Justice, Delroy Chuck, in 2017 had promised the establishment of such an institute. So we all eagerly appreciate, given the nature of this summit, that the Minister will address that certainly. And we invite you, Madam Minister, Marlene Madahu-Fort, Queen's Counsel, JP, Member of Parliament, and Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, to join us here now to share her comments as we look forward to the information she will give to us concerning the development and the handling of human rights here in Jamaica.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Madam Moderator, Madam Executive Director, and Indicom Commissioner, Bar President, I don't think it's possible for me to go through all of the protocol already established, so I will simply adopt. Having listened to the passionate presentation of Madam Executive Director, I thought to myself that perhaps the media will get all the news that it wants to report, and there would be no need for me to address this forum. Let me say that I am pleased to be here. I thank you for the invitation. I regret that time did not allow me to go through the report in detail, but I have read some of it with much interest. I should like to begin by extending heartiest congratulations to Jamaican for Justice, JFJ. You have certainly left your imprint on Jamaica. You can be justly proud for the contribution you have made to nation building. Be justly proud. And I join you in commending all who have held offices in this organization. I know that Jamaica is better for the work you have done. I believe that we all share a common interest in the protection of human rights. I believe that we understand and agree that these are non-negotiable rights that must be assured the highest level of protection. But I think we come from the different perspectives in looking at the matter. For me, I am grateful for the offices I've held prior to coming into this office of Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs. I'm grateful for the perspectives. I'm grateful for what I have seen, and I'm grateful for the understanding that even though we share common interest, we may come to a subject matter from different positions. But I do believe that we are all working together for a better Jamaica. I assure the JFG and all citizens of Jamaica that as the minister charged with the enormous responsibility of the legal and constitutional affairs of the country, I will meet with you, I will hear your perspective, I will take them into consideration, and I will ensure that there is ongoing dialogue between your government and the people. That is the commitment I give to you. I think it is extremely important that we work together in furthering this common goal that we share. Jamaica has come a long way on the human rights front, a long, long way. And I think we still have a longer way to go. I'm going to abandon the prepared text that I came with, because I realize that this forum really calls for an engagement, though I think there is going to be a follow-up panel discussion. I regret that I will have to run sooner than later, because I have the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament reviewing the firearms bill, and my presence is required there. But it was important for me to split the time and be here to share with you. So, you've asked about the Human Rights Institute, and it is true that a commitment was made by the government of Jamaica to establishing the institute in the past. For me, the matter is under review, and not under review in a negative way. You are aware that the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom at Chapter 3 of the Constitution has created both a vertical and a horizontal relationship and paradigm for the Charter of Rights. And I believe that we have to look at how we enable the institutions of the state to deal with what has been guaranteed in the Charter of Rights. So we are coming from a place where the protection of rights was placed squarely at the feet of the government. And important as that is, and there can be no shrinking away from that obligation, I ask that you bear in mind that there is a responsibility that is placed on all citizens. And it is a major departure. It's a major departure in the framework for the protection of rights in this jurisdiction. It exists in other jurisdictions, and it is something that we will have to look at as we reimagine the institutions for the protection of rights and freedom. I am of the view, ladies and gentlemen, that it is responsibility that guarantees rights. And every time I read the reports of state atrocities, and we have far too many documented in our law books, I am strengthened in that perspective, that responsibility guarantees rights. And my starting point is the responsibility of the agents of the state in the discharge of their functions. So the cases that you work with that are documented calls into question the approach that is taken in the exercise of state power. But it doesn't rest there. It also calls into question how we treat each other. Because the truth is that from what I see as Member of Parliament in St. James, West Central, and I'm being very specific in my example, it is not the state at this time that is impacting the rights of the citizens of Jamaica in a negative way. It is fellow citizens who believe they can do whatever they want, criminally so, heartlessly so, egregiously so, with impunity. And so, none of us is able to walk around as freely as we would like. None of us is able to enjoy many of the rights that are guaranteed, because those who have the responsibility to ensure that we can enjoy the rights are not discharging the responsibility. So as someone in government, my starting point will be with those who have responsibility in government. I think that it is easy for us to beat up on ourselves because we do have a long way to go, but we have also come a long way. And again, I say JFJ can be very proud of the contribution it has made. The very fact that we have the INDICOM is testament to where we are coming from and where we are today, even though we still have a long way to go. It is going to be difficult for me in this forum to tell you what it is that will be done in the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs on the subject matter of the protection of human rights, simply because there is a process that we go through, and I'm not at liberty to speak to policy issues before we go through the process of settling those policy issues. And also because my own approach is a consultative one, and I have begun the process. We are not yet at the stage to make the announcements, but what we are very clear about are the goals that we want to achieve. And I will say this much, that we need to amplify the rights framework in the Charter of Rights. It is already referenced there. And we have to strike an appropriate balance between the guarantee of rights, personal responsibilities, and the wider public interest. And it's not about clawing back any of the rights, but it is not the government alone that has responsibility for all of us. The government has its special responsibility, and it must be held to account. And I say that with as much passion, Madam Executive Director, as you have spoken. You highlighted the use of this declaration of state of public emergency and the use of executive powers. In the management of the COVID-19 pandemic, after assessing the legal infrastructure, the decision was taken to use executive powers, mindful of the concerns, mindful of the assessed dangers in the use of executive powers. But we were dealing with a pandemic a virus about which little was known at the time, and information was changing rapidly, and the need for flexibility in the response was paramount. Although the framework under the Disaster Risk Management Act did not require the orders to be promulgated to be brought to the Parliament, we took the decision that we would bring them to the Parliament as an added safeguard to have discussions and to have the input of both sides of the aisles and the input of the wider society in settling those orders. And that approach was consistent from start to finish. But of course, you can't please everyone. We also took the decision to keep a short cycle, because when you are impacting rights, you have to be mindful of any prolonged interference and engagement with those rights. And although it had the downside of uncertainty, because you may not know what is going to come in the next cycle, again, what was of paramount consideration was to ensure that the rights were infringed as least as possible, and only what was strictly required to deal with the pandemic. I sit in the National Security Cabinet, the National Security Council. And while I'm not at liberty to take tales from council to the public, I listen with much interest the divergence of views on the use of the state of emergency and policing powers in general. And I'm always interested in concerns that are raised around detention and arrest. And because of that, the administration has embarked on a detailed examination of the issues. And I think some of the information is known publicly, but may be treated anecdotally. So it is perhaps no secret that in the communities, the geographical locale where we have a high level of crime and violence, would-be witnesses are sometimes engaged in the criminal activities, as are victims. This is what the research on the ground shows. And even if I were to speak anecdotally as a member of parliament, it is also what I glean from interacting with the people. And many times when the police go in response to a murder or a shooting, they have had to clear the scene in order to protect witnesses. And so you see, you will hear that persons are taken up and then they are released and there is no charge. It is not always it is oftentimes a very deliberate action taken to protect lives. And it is my hope that sooner than later, there will be a wider discussion with members of the public about what we see in the communities. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact that we have been suffering from such a high level of criminal violence, it must cause us to probe a little more deeply what is happening in the society. You know, it is not the case that there is a target on persons from low socioeconomic circumstances. And every time I see that, even though it may be the fact that many are implicated or are affected by the actions, I am in the habit of marking progress, especially when the problem is so large. And I know that we're all concerned. And I share the view of the JFJ very strongly, that the state is not entitled to break its own laws in its efforts to get the law respected and upheld. I share that view, and for me, it's non-negotiable. But I wonder sometimes whether some of the conversations we have around crime and violence require a deeper probe. We can't make excuses for wrongdoing wherever that wrongdoing occurs, whether it's in the state, in the family, in the society. And being poor doesn't mean that you have to turn to crime and violence. It doesn't follow. I understand that there may be opportunities and enticements or lack of opportunities, but it doesn't follow. There are many poor and dignified people in Jamaica who do not resort to crime and violence. And very, very often our response, when there is reasonable grounds to believe that someone, regardless of where they are from, has committed crime, sometimes that response is very uneven. So, there is something about the rule of law. When I explain the rule of law simplistically to my constituents, I say there are 3 planks on which the rule of law rests. Our laws must be publicly promulgated. They must be written down and people must know them, and they mustn't change at the whim and fancy of the government. And they must be equally enforced. It doesn't matter where you are from, it doesn't matter what office you hold, the laws must be equally enforced. And I know this is a challenge in reality and in perception in Jamaica. And then the third aspect is that our laws must be impartially adjudicated upon. And the 3 are critical for the protection of human rights. We have a lot of work before us, but I do believe that increasingly we're understanding that all of us are part of this work. And so as much as you may come gashing and there is much vengeance against the state of what needs to be done, I tell you that for the time that I assume the risks of state responsibility through the office, I am prepared to listen. I'm prepared to hear where you are coming from on the issues. And for me, and I think I may close on this point, I look forward to the time when we will appreciate the need for a strong state, not an oppressive state. And for too long, we equate a strong and effective state with an oppressive state. We have to strike that balance between the rights, personal responsibilities, and the wider public interest. We have a lot to reconcile in this nation, but increasingly I take comfort and courage, and I'm encouraged by the fact that organizations like JFJ are not afraid to tell it to the government, but to do so in a way that is mindful that we all have different responsibilities. Government doesn't stand alone and separate and apart from its people. We have a lot of work to do in educating persons who hold offices in government to understand that you have to know what it means to operate in the public interest. And the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms at Chapter 3 of the Constitution affects all laws. And there is a particular approach that has to be taken, and that is part of the work entrusted to me in my leadership of this new ministry. So, congratulations, JFJ. Rights are guaranteed by responsibility, and we must strive to strike a better balance between the rights that are so important to us, responsibility, personal responsibility, and the wider public interest. I will see how long I can stay to participate in the forum, but if I have to slip out, I do understand. I wish for you success. Thank you for the information that you have provided in this report, and I look forward to sharing another perspective on some of the issues that you have recorded in the report. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Madam Minister, please don't leave the podium. I'm
So
elbowing
this is
the
her way
minister
now
to
of putting me
stay.
on the spot.
Yes. I haven't been able to do this for quite a while, and I'm so grateful that you're here, Madam Minister. You've made an interesting presentation. There are lots of nuggets to chew on. I'll just choose 3 for the purpose, and you have given me that latitude by saying you're abandoning your speech, and it takes exchange, so I'm hopping on that. Your observation that there are many young persons of the lower socioeconomic class who are impacted by the SOEs is something that resonates with all of us in here. As an attorney and in your capacity as Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, besides the SOEs, is there a legal and better option that could be used to recognize equal rights for everybody regardless of where they come from?
I'm not sure that I understand your question when you say
Besides,
beside the SOE.
if we weren't to use the SOEs as a legal option, is there another legal option that could be employed that would give us the same effect of fighting crime and being in a position to demonstrate that it would not seem or appear to be that only persons from a particular group or class of persons are affected by it?
I don't share the view that only persons from a particular class or group are affected by the high level of violence in Jamaica. So when we look at the per capita rate of murder in Jamaica, which is about 8 times higher than the region, and the region is about 6 times higher than the world. And we look on the impact on it for the administration that I'm a part of, and looking at the framework, we consider that as a state of emergency in the country that requires a very focused and targeted action.
So there would be no other legal option?
No,
but
I'm not
using
saying so. Don't put. All matters are under review. At any given time, ladies and gentlemen, until and unless new laws are passed, government will have to use the tools that are available to it.
Very well. And
right? And so let me just clarify, and I know the use of the SOE is a point around which much discussion has been generated, and there are many different views on the matter. It is not, so the approach is how best, right, within the context, within the available resources, we can deal with the problem that is affecting all of us and that is depriving us of a huge chunk of our GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, where I come from, the top tier right is the right to life, right? And the right to life is protected with the offense of murder and different categories of murder. And I have to tell you that I personally do not share the view that implementation of the death penalty would be a retrograde step. I don't share that view. And I'm not saying it is my personal views to be taken as an indication of what the government will or will not do. I also have concerns about the use of the death penalty, but more than anything else, I do believe that when you have penalties, if you're not going to use them, get rid of them. And if you have them, use them. That's my view.
On another note, Minister, in your remit as Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, we've had this perception that prisoners are not...
May I ask, how soon will you go into
the panel
discussion?
Soon, but you're not going to be here. So I have to take you when I find you. And I gave you a heads up that I was going to be...
You did.
I was going to ask you a few questions.
Did. That's all right.
Because we're engaging. Prisoners have rights. Is there going to be an
Jamaicans
approach?
Have rights.
All Jamaicans have rights, but yes, prisoners also have rights.
Prisoners lose some of theirs when they are convicted, though.
Agreed. But when we talk about their method or the manner in which they are detained, is it a clear view that prisoners have a right to health and a right to adequate provisions whilst incarcerated?
I do believe so. I don't think that's a matter on which there should be dispute.
And since we agree on that, because there are many persons who are of the view that there is not enough being done to ensure that is protected because there is not adequate fiscal space, is that a justifiable explanation for not ensuring that our prisoners have adequate provisions when it comes to food and healthcare?
You know, you really are provoking me this morning.
I was meant to do that.
Because the truth is that when we look on the call on our resources that are limited, much of which we are robbed of because of the high level of crime and violence. There are many things that we would want to do differently. There are many other provisions that we would want to make by way of better remuneration, better conditions of service, for which we have been constrained for a long, long time. You would have seen amendments to the Corrections Act that were taken before the Parliament and passed recently. The matter is under review, the conditions under which all persons exist, whether you exist in uptown, downtown, side town, in the homes, in the prisons, but in particular, conditions under which persons exist when the state has responsibility for them. Those have to be looked at. I know there are concerns about the prison conditions, as there are concerns about the state of our roads, the state of garbage collection, the state of lights, etc., etc. I'm not in a position to give you details on the conditions, but I know that it is a matter that is work in progress at this time. It's the Ministry of National Security that has responsibility for the subject matter, and work is being done. In fact, the entire correction system is under review at this time.
We only raised it with you, Minister, because we are aware that the remit falls in some respects in terms of the constitutionality of the rights that they have. And before you go, in your capacity now, I'm not sure if it's in your capacity as Legal and Constitutional Affairs Minister, or it would really fall in the remit of Justice, but the Coroner's Court, the State of Justice report has indicated that there is a severe challenge in terms of the resources for the coroner, the Special Coroner Court. And I've seen where there have been an increased number of judges and number of courtrooms, but the coroner is still expected to visit this one coroner, 13 parishes. He still takes handwritten notes, and the disposal rate is less than 30%. Will there be any attention given to the coroner's court, particularly because there is this right to a fair trial, which is constitutionally protected?
So the coroner's court fall under the subject matter of the administration of justice, which is under the Minister of Justice portfolio. And conventionally, ministers do not speak on portfolio matters of other ministers as a general rule. I will say that trial doesn't take place in the coroner's court.
It's investigation.
So the coroner's court deals with an examination of the circumstances surrounding death in questionable circumstances to see whether or not anyone is to be held criminally liable. And then it gives a verdict where the inquiry is made with a jury for another part of the process. I share your view that it is way too slow, and I think perhaps it's, among other things, a reflection of the high death rate in questionable circumstances, higher than the capacity of our existing institutions to deal with them in a timely way. You do know that a special coroner was put in place for the corporate area. When I went to the bench decades ago, in my parochial jurisdiction, there were a lot of matters. I think we have come some way, but there are still too many left unresolved for too long. The Council of Justice meets this afternoon. I give you my assurance that I will indicate to the Minister of Justice that this question has been raised, and perhaps he could address it.
See how helpful this exchange has been?
I believe exchanges are always helpful,
very much,
more
Madam
than anything
Minister.
else. They allow us to better understand where we are coming from. And like I say, I think that we share common interest, even if we have different positions on the matter. Justice is something I'm passionate about. Admittedly, I may come from the issue a little differently, because justice means many things to many people, and some want to do their wrongs and get away with it and think that that is justice. And some may want to do their wrongs and think that when the long arm of the law comes down on them, that it is, discrimination, etc., etc. But we will work together.
Thank you.
We will
Appreciate
work
it.
together. So I can leave now. if I have to.
Let me not stand too close so you can feel free to
All right.
move along. But thank you very much,
but
Madam Minister, for joining us.
I would like to hear a little more, so I will check in to see if I can stay a little longer to hear. You know, I subscribe. I don't like just popping in and popping out, because many times a lot of what you are saying, you would like it to be heard by the ears of government, right? So, but congratulations, JFG. I think you're off to a good start, and no question is too difficult to be posed, and all answers must be given sincerely.
Thank you.
Have a good morning.
See, I have to be rather gracious to the Minister for coercing her, is that the word? To answer a few more questions. So thank you so much, Madam Minister, for joining. And Mr. Permanent Secretary, thank you for ensuring that the Minister was willing to step off the radar.
It is remiss of me, since we have kind of made it informal. So remiss of me not to have acknowledged my Permanent Secretary, Mr. Wayne Robertson. Please stand and be recognized, because he is an important gatekeeper at the Ministry. And the correspondence will go to him, and he will make the assessment, et cetera, but I can tell you he's extremely facilitative. He has a keen sense of justice and awareness, and I'm happy that we share the approach that we must listen to the people on this very important subject matter. And I'm so pleased that this is not the forum that's going to ask me about the form of government that Jamaica will take.
Another time. I'm sure I'll get that opportunity at another time. But now you all hear and understand who to blame if you can't get through to the Minister. Don't forget the name, the Permanent Secretary, Wayne Robertson. But what is important, ladies and gentlemen, is that we are in a forum where we get to not just see the findings, but to address the findings and see how best we can treat with them. It's that time, now for it, as they would say, where we get to hear what the findings are. We will hear what the findings are from the Monitoring, Evaluation and Research Officer, Ms. Ornella Kelly. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ornella Kelly, and I'll be doing the findings for JFJ. So for the period of 2020 to 2021, JFJ undertook a total of 297 cases. One second, I don't see my presentation. Oh, here we are. So they undertook a total of 297 cases, the majority of which represented SOE matters. It accounted for 35%, so that's a third of Jamaicans for Justice caseload. That gives us 104 SOE matters within that period. Separate and apart from that, we had 19% of the cases that showed experiences of human rights violations. So that's 59 cases of marginalized persons that belong into key populations, persons living with HIV, who would have expressed that they have encountered some sort of human rights violation and wanted to seek redress. Following that, and rounding out the top three major issues that we addressed at JFJ for the period is that of abuse by security forces. So we had 45 cases which represented citizens being abused by security forces. So that included 24 cases of police homicide, and the remainder being characterized by physical abuse and verbal assault by the security forces. So while the Constitution prohibits arbitrary detention and arrest, it also allows for the arrest of persons if they are committing a criminal activity or about to commit a criminal activity. So one of the issues and concerns that were raised with the SOE matters is that of arbitrary arrest, the police arresting citizens without reasonable suspicion. Thank you. So yes, thank you. Arresting persons without reasonable suspicion, and this amounted to persons being incarcerated for an undue lengthy time in detention centers and being picked up from various places, like in the communities, at their homes, without any thoughts about what they're being detained for or what charges they had against them. Okay. So looking closer at the SOE matters at JFJ, for the 104 matters that we undertook, majority of the individuals or the detainees were males and a small minority were females. So this is the breakdown of how that looks. So this is a breakdown of how that looks. So 94% were males and the remainder were females. So about 1/3 of the detainees were between the ages of 18 and 24, and overall, like 45% of the detainees were below the age of 32. Speaking with the detainees and the persons who brought their cases to JFJ, what we found out is that significant to their experiences were the fact that they were detained without any cause, detained within the communities, detained from their homes. They weren't given any communication or offered any legal aid once they were detained. Their family members had no information about the process when they were detained. And in extreme circumstances, you had persons who were detained up to a year. So let me just go back here and show you the horrors of illegal detention. So these are some of the sentiments shared by the detainees and some of our clients at JFJ. Now, looking at the geographical location of the complainants at JFJ, most of them came from the Kingston metropolitan area, second and followed up by Westmoreland. So this is where most persons said they were detained, in Kingston or in Westmoreland. And I guess that corroborates the fact that many of the SOEs were within or declared within the communities of Kingston and in Westmoreland. So of the 104 cases, we had a total of 24% that indicated that complainants were detained for more than 90 days. And as pointed out before, I think the most extreme was one individual who was detained for 379 days. We had a total of about 10 complainants who were detained for up to 12 months. Remember, this is at best, they should be detained for 90 days. So having somebody detained under an SOE for 12 months is quite severe and egregious. So we just thought this was something that we should bring to the attention of everyone. So some case example, as you can see, this is one of the complainants' story, how they were detained and how long. And you can just take a minute to look at that. So besides being detained without cause or without being informed, some of the social impacts on the detainees is such that they lost their jobs. They were not able to hold down their homes while they were being detained if they rented a space. Their family members faced undue hardship. You had one detainee whose wife was pregnant and he wasn't there for the birth of his son. You had another who left his spouse and she had to sell the car just so she could support him and have funds to visit him while he was being detained. So the economic impact is far-reaching and it's not isolated just to the person that is just to the individual that is detained. So the family strain, the deprivation of liberty, and the economic loss is something key that most of the detainees said that they experience under the SOE detention. Now, looking at the abuse by security forces, we did the police homicides. We had 24 cases within the period and 21 physical abuse and verbal abuse issues. There we go. So this is the breakdown of the 45 cases that we had. 54 was physical abuse and the remainder police killings. As is the norm, the large majority of persons that are killed by the police are young men. There was a number of females that were killed as well. Most of these killings occurred in Kingston and St. Andrew, and the remainder was dispersed across the remaining parishes. In the context of GBV as well, we undertook some cases regarding discrimination. These are predominantly from survivors or victims who have experienced gender-based violence and interface with the police to make a report about their experience. What you found here is that the police and the victim's interaction was less than a survivor-centered approach, or what we'd want our victims to experience once they go to the police to make a report of gender-based violence. So the complainants for the GBV issues were very young, between 18 and 24. We had 22% of the cases within this age group. And as you can see, 32 to 37 was the follow-up age group, which had 20% of complainants as well. Most complainants experience physical abuse, followed by emotional or psychological abuse. And as norm within GBV cases, the main perpetrator indicated by the complainants is that of their current or ex-partner. Now, back to the interactions of the victim or survivor with the police. As you can see, these are some excerpts from persons sharing their experience with the police. So one individual went to the Constant Spring station and was told by an officer within a detention or within the curfew that they should go back home or else he would lock her up. So in that process, he did not take her complaint and turned her away from the station. So the issue with these complaints is oftentimes, especially in rape incidents, police officers do not offer victims the appropriate resources such as PEP, PEP for HIV to ensure that the person is not exposed, and to one second. Okay, so given that JFJ works with other persons within the response, what we find is the response to rape and rape victims by the police is less than what we want it to be. So we'd like some So we'd like some concerns and some thoughts to be given to how police addresses victims of GBV and rape. And I think that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Ornella, for sharing with us the findings from the report. You have, by now, a copy. You can look at it. You see the cases there. You see the interaction, the comments. It's hard work putting it all together, I'm sure. If you have any questions for Ornella Kelly, feel free. You can raise them just now. We have persons here who may have a question for the findings. If not, feel free to find her at the end of the summit, and you may make inquiries. There, as I have indicated, the publication of the State of Justice report, which gives you an overview of the legal cases. It explores the themes that we have raised here, specifically looking at the state of emergency, police abuse, homicides, vulnerable and marginalized populations, and of course, as Ornella has mentioned, and I can appreciate how emotional it can be for persons to go to the police station in such a situation and not being able to get assistance. Whether it's 1 or 2 or 100 or 10,000, the approach must always be the same, and it must be fair and adequate. it's a convenient time that we invite our panelists. We will have our panel discussion at this time to perhaps delve a little bit more into what the findings have revealed. And we will certainly invite Commissioner Hugh Faulkner to join me here. He is the Commissioner for the Independent Commission of Investigation, INDECOM. Rear Admiral Hardley Lunn, no stranger to us, he has the expertise as former Commissioner of Police and former Chief of Staff of the Jamaica Defense Force. And many of us would be familiar with the writings, the recommendations, the publications of Professor Anthony Harriott. He's currently director of the Institute of Criminal Justice and Security at the University of the West Indies. Gentlemen, thank you for agreeing to join us here this morning. I think I could perhaps take my seat on that side. Gentlemen, once again, thank you. Perhaps it's most convenient because we are talking about and have raised the issue of the importance of INDECOM. Madam Minister had mentioned that it is one of our shining moments coming out of our own experience. The report, Commissioner, mentions a concern that INDECOM is donor funded. Given that it is donor funded, and the reality that pandemic has shown us that donors retreat because businesses can't donate, and even in the face now of the Ukraine-Russian situation where pockets may be drawn, how does this affect the independence and the continued security of the functioning of INDECOM?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And I crave your indulgence to adopt the protocol that has already been established. I believe, putting the matter in some perspective, you would allow me, could better explain my response. Firstly, donors are contributors to the work of INDECOM. The government of Jamaica, and I believe in that big yellow book, its head 8,000, is the major contributor to the work of INDECOM. But, and I'll be pressing for additional funding to strengthen INDECOM in our first quarter report for this calendar year. And INDECOM, as you are mindful, is a body that seeks to ensure that the citizen, in his or her interaction with the law enforcement bodies, does not suffer abuse or injury. And I say injury in a general sense. So we are touching on the realm of human rights. Jamaicans for Justice also touches on the realm of human rights. Look at the banner. Do you see any external collaboration in that quest? If you look at the banner, yes, the United Nations Democracy Fund. But if you look at the work of the United Nations, it's a multilateral body, yes, but it has set standards in terms of prisons, in terms of the engagement with citizens, etc. Now, INDECOM has a partnership with the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office that provides us with funding. And I must say that this has been helpful in assisting our resource needs, our technical needs, and our equipment, our tools. And the legislative policy for INDECOM is the exclusive domain of the Jamaican Parliament. The operational aspects of INDECOM are the exclusive domain of INDECOM. So, Madam Moderator, we have assistance, but we do not have trespass.
I see.
Thanks you.
Professor, I note that you are acknowledging the question and the comments of the Commissioner. Your view on the security or the tenure of Indicom in its particular position, given that we have a situation where the JCF is in fact charging, arresting, and prosecuting their own officers in a space where we have high numbers of criminal activity, particularly among our young men. What do you think about the position of Indicom as it is in response to funding?
So, remove this, is it there? Yeah, so
I assume you've been vaccinated, so we're good.
yeah, so I'm fully vaccinated as well. So you raised the issue of funding for Indicom. Tony. Oh, the mic, yes. It's on. Yeah, it's good. So you raised the issue of the funding of Indicom as one aspect of its precariousness, if you wish. And I would much rather a situation in which Indicom is funded in the main from local sources, and that funding is reliable, and they can plan their development based on those commitments. I think it's an important responsibility of government to assure the funding of Indicom. So that's an issue that I think the public should be alert to, and that JFD should perhaps do some lobbying on. That's the first aspect of it. Its status in law, aspects of that have been challenged in the past, but I'm hoping we are beyond that now.
But in respect of I think we have been joined by Madam Minister. Thank you so much, Madam. Do I take it you wish to add your comment to the question raised regarding Indicom?
I didn't hear the question.
Very well, Minister. We'll address the other issue then, Professor, about the prosecution of road cops. We've recently seen the newspaper headlines about cops being part of gangs. And the irony of it is that they are being charged, arrested, and investigated by the JCF members themselves. Are we serious about police reform if that is the mode upon which we're going to be using to handle rogue operatives within the Jamaica Constabulary Force? Okay,
so the police has a responsibility to investigate their own. And where police services behave like other professions that are profoundly concerned with their status and prestige in society, that as professionals who give service society, the members of the profession are infused with the appropriate value system that places at its core service and accountability and so forth. To the extent that our police service is concerned with this, then it would want to have its own independent capacity to safeguard the integrity of the institution. They ought to be the persons most vested in safeguarding their integrity. So I don't believe in denying them the capacity so to do. I believe we should hold them to account for doing it. And that process, whereby, as we know, IPROB has this responsibility. Like Indicom, it should be giving reports that are made public. Its work should be more transparent. And people should know who's the head of IPRO, right? Just like how all the matters that apply to Indicom, I think even though it is internal, it needs to be held to account to be able to deliver and so forth. So that is really my first point about this. But the society needs a second line of defense. That has been our experience. That is why we now have Indicom. So the issue is not to diminish the internal, but to better enable Indicom to cope with the load.
Do you agree with that, former Commissioner, Rear Admiral?
Thank you, and good morning. You know, I got up early this morning and I made some notes, and on the very point that you just asked, my two opening lines are these. An individual who has the powers of a constable is amongst the most powerful persons in Jamaica. A criminal who has the powers of a constable is amongst the most dangerous persons in Jamaica. Those were my opening lines. Now, from the recent incident, my takeaway from it is a positive one. Because there's no secret that there are criminals in the force. They did not join as criminals, they've morphed. I remember I addressed the Jamaica Employees Federation as commissioner 2008, January. And I stated emphatically that there are criminals in the force. And I was pilloried and harangued, etc., by all sorts of people, but I never relented. So my takeaway from this incident is a positive one. Discover them, clean them out, and clear them out. Those are my comments.
Well said, former Commissioner. But I want to stir the conversation now, having raised your comments because we were concerned about the stability of income given the donor situation. And now that we appreciate that the view seems to be that you have to eradicate the force of the criminal elements, there was a comment made by Madam Minister this morning, and I think if we're going to be examining human rights and the rule of law, we must address it. The issue of responsibility of citizens, and I believe, Madam Minister, I'm very glad that you rejoined us. You made the point about the fact that it is the state, it's not the state that is affecting our rights, it is the individuals. Do you agree with that, Professor Harriott?
Yes, I agree. I believe that the states, look, the basic function of the state is to protect our rights, to ensure that we are safe and that we are free to realize our potentials in society. That's the basic function. Okay, but we do have responsibilities to each other. And I think too little is said about those responsibilities. In other words, rights flow two ways, right? It's the safeguarding of the rights by the state, regard that as a kind of vertical way of looking at rights, but there is also the horizontal, our relationship, our obligations, our responsibilities to our fellow citizens. Respect for each other's lives, or respect for our right to life. That's a responsibility that we have to each other. How do we exercise this responsibility? We have to learn and practice respect for each other in our encounters with each other every day, in the school, at the workplace, etc., etc. And I think we have to say more to our citizens that we have to cultivate and practice getting our responsibilities to each other, our respect for each other's rights right.
Does this mean, though, Professor, and to you, Commissioner Harley Lewin, that if we are going to be focusing on the responsibility of our citizenry, that harsher gun laws may be the answer to ensuring that there's greater responsibility among citizens? I'll come back to you, Madam Minister. I note the smirk. Commissioner, former Commissioner, that was to you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me say this. There are responsibilities all around. We did not elect officials and appoint police officers to be overlords over us. They are our servants. We have abrogated our responsibility to hold them accountable. And I don't want to get into a long historical as to how we got there, because there's a host of issues that surround this. And our citizens have got to understand their responsibilities. And the responsibilities of every citizen starts with getting enumerated and vote when the time comes. And after you vote, it's not the end of it. You have a continuing responsibility to be aware and beware in everything that is being done in your name, in our name. So that has to be a total education and reorienting and so on. We really need a new covenant. We need a covenant between the masters and the servants as to how we are going to go forward. We tend to take an attitude that whosoever is elected have all the answers. And we proceed along that basis.
So do
we have to move together.
Not hearing you, Professor.
I'm saying, I'm asking Rear Admiral, don't we also need a covenant between ourselves? How we treat each other in our day-to-day interactions?
Look, there's no question about that. When people in the inner city are murdering each other, the people in some parts of Kingston didn't give a damn. Neither did the people in Montego Bay, Mount Salem, because they were not affected. Nor the people in Portland, because it's the dirty criminal them. And in fact, from some levels of officialdom, the attitude is, good thing, let them kill one another. Little did we know it's going to migrate. And here we are. Because we were not our brother's keeper, we did not care what was happening to our fellow citizens. And the only time we get worked up is when it affects someone close to us. It is wrong.
The impact of coming close to home, the drive of fear, the fact that it is now close to our doors. Minister, you rejoined us. How do we get from the point where, as former commissioner has said, we need to get to that covenant, get to that appreciation, returning to being our brother's keeper, being responsible so that we can responsibly exercise our rights? How do we do that?
Excuse me if I answer you indirectly, but permit me to just comment on what Rear Admiral Lewin said. I see it a little differently. I believe that there is little or no outrage when our citizens kill each other, especially when it is alleged that they're part of the gangs. There is a feeling in a wide segment of the society that it's okay. The criminals and themselves are fighting it out. And the outrage comes more when the state, through police action, intervenes and something happens, unfortunate happens, in that intervention. I see more outrage in those circumstances. But I agree with him that when it hits closer home or hits home, that is when we get some outrage. So there is indeed an unevenness in the society in its response, and consequently the signals that are sent. And so it is important, I don't think it can be said often enough, that the responsibility is both vertical and horizontal, the state to the citizen and the citizen to the citizen. On the matter of the individual, I find it unfortunate, for want of a better word, that in some of our institutions, state institutions, we do not take the approach of holding someone to account when a wrong is committed by that person. For whatever reason, it is left unattended, and before long, the institution is brought into disrepute. Not yet sure of what the culture is in an institution like the JCF, or what it was over the years, where officers blatantly disregard the law, they break it in their efforts to uphold it, and the superior officer who is to hold that subordinate officer to account does not do so for any of many reasons. We hear the jokes about the squaddy mentality and all of those concerns which brought into question the capacity of the JCF to investigate itself, which eventually led to the independent Commission of Investigations, the INDICOM. So we have to look at how we treat with errant behavior at the point, the place to spot a fault is where it occurs. And we have to, and because even if you put the best systems in place, those systems are administered by office holders. And if they do not discharge their responsibilities properly, you are going to have problem. And of course, if you don't have the system, that's an even bigger problem. You know, so I think we have to look at it in a little more nuanced way and a little more deeply. And criminals exist in all quarters of society. I am firmly of the view that those who make the law and those who uphold the law always must lead by example. Always. I am of the view that when we write laws, the laws must apply to everyone, regardless of your station in life, and must be enforced and adjudicated accordingly.
May I respond to one point the minister made about the disproportionate responses? Minister, criminals are under no obligation to obey the law. That's what makes them criminals.
No, citizens are under obligation.
The state is obliged, or the agents of the state, to operate under the rules and so on that has been set forth by elected officials acting on behalf of the people. When any arm of the state goes outside those boundaries, they become criminals.
Madam Moderator.
I was just going to come to you, Commissioner.
Right. If I may add, it is quite good for us to look at the roles and responsibility of various segments. You look at the role of the citizen, you look at the role of the police, you look at the role of government, but the embracing principle is before our eyes right now, which is the rule
of law.
Mm-hmm. And what the rule of law means, in my view, we tend to misconstrue what the rule of law means. The rule of law means that law rules. So in other words, whether you're a citizen, whether you're government, whether you're whatever authority, you should come under the rule of law. But if law is dispensed in a way that recognizes adversely geography, financial status, intellectual status, color, etc., then other things will be ruling other than law.
Do you agree?
When there is the rule of law, there will be equity, and that should be our major mission in this country.
Indeed, Commissioner, because I want you to address that for us. Given where we are, the state of justice, looking at the report, looking at the unevenness and the inequality in the application of law, do you think enough is being done to ensure that those who break the law in authority are treated according to the law with the sanctions that should be imputed on them? And I ask that in the context of you being Commissioner of INDICOM.
Right. Well, from my perspective, in whatever matter that is being dealt with that involves law, then the level of vigor and fearlessness ought to be the same regardless who the perpetrator is. And that is what we aspire for.
I noticed you use the word aspire, which seems to suggest that we're not exactly there at this time. Professor?
I could not sit here and honestly say we are there. Because in my view, there are indices that would, if you look at number of convicts who are detained, which areas are under curfew, etc. And some maybe justifiably so, but there are economic denominators that jump at you.
And these economic denominators is where you come in, Professor. You've written several articles, publications on the impact of the socioeconomic system, the experience on crime. In your experience, given where you are we any closer to getting to that point where it's equal across the board?
Where?
It's equal across the board.
Okay, so
the microphone, Prof.
Our society is scarred by some gross inequalities, historically scarred, and those inequalities are renewed based on how we, to use that fabulous, I think, biblical quote, how we live and have our being, to be vague about it. Okay, so how do we get change to a more just society where the law is universal and its enforcement is fair and so forth? How do we move to that? The people who suffer the most have to make their voices heard, and those in authority, in government and so forth, have to find channels of participation and structures that amplify their voice. And that way, we to the extent that we listen and we make change, then we become a more just society. Okay, that's putting it in the abstract. In relation to the police, I believe we have to re-examine the system of oversight. There are problems with internal accountability, and there are problems with external accountability. I would like to see a system of oversight, which is by definition external, oversight as a system of accountability that finds a way to structure the participation of those who feel the injustices the most. There are various models for so doing. I don't think this is the place to get into what that would look like unless you want to probe. But that's my way of thinking about how to approach the fix.
As a solution then, given your experience where we are, you have the benefit of seeing what we're doing now. What is it that we should be doing that we're not doing to be able to treat with the situation at hand?
Okay, so police oversight, police accountability, broadly speaking, is split. So you have INDICOM, and INDICOM investigates, and you have the Police Citizen Oversight Authority, which is able to inspect, but it can't do anything more than that. It inspects and it reports, can't get anything done or oblige the police to do anything, but it has access to information and it makes its report. Okay, and then you have the PSC, the Police Services Commission. Police Services Commission is not, properly speaking, a part of the system of oversight. It's part of the system of governance of the police force. And it deals with promotions, disciplinary, rewards and punishment. Okay, so how do you bring about change if the mechanisms for rewarding good behavior and punishing bad behavior are outside of the system of oversight? That's a basic structural problem.
So it should be one and the same.
I am for a system of oversight that brings investigation, inspection, and the ability to manipulate rewards and punishment in one place.
And that suggestion provided by you, would that be one of the options that we would have to reduce the incidences of violations of rights?
I believe you get less of what you punish. That's how we approach crime. And we get more of what we reward. Two basic levers of change.
Madam Minister, one of the comments that you made earlier spurred me to ask, is fear a sufficient driver of public policy? We are constantly told we are not in ordinary times. We are faced with the statistics. We have discussed the fact that crime is at our doorsteps now. Is it a reasonable driver for public policy? Is it effective? And is it something that we should be embracing?
I don't know if you're assuming that fear is the primary driver for public policy on the security front. If that is an assumption, it doesn't hold. And fear of and by itself certainly cannot be a determining factor. But your sense of public safety in a public space is something that has to be taken into account.
when we talk about the sense
And statistics, those are not subjective matters. When facts are established, facts are facts. True and provable.
former commissioner,
You know, so different people can use the same set of facts differently. You can assess data differently. But if you may permit me to just make a comment. So the Police Service Commission is a constitutional commission.
correct?
The INDICOM is a parliamentary commission. And then the JCF is an executive, a part of the executive arm of government, not the political executive, charged with the responsibility for upholding the force. The entire police system is under review. I don't think we are at the same place today as we were yesterday or a few years ago. And you doubt my word, look on the budget that has been allocated. Change does not always manifest itself immediately, especially when you're dealing with adaptive change. And a lot of the issues that plague us are issues around our culture, how we do things, what we value, the approach that we take. Many of them are not solvable by a technical fix, and they take time. And I think we have the tendency to want to see results immediately, and we become extremely impatient with process. We're so caught up with events, and we think the same day you sow is the same day you're going to reap. You know? So there are hard issues in the society that we will have to come to terms with. But for me, who have chosen to light my candle instead of curse the darkness, assume the risk of running and not just thinking that I must tell elected officials how to run, I literally have put my money where my mouth is, and I have stepped out and I have said, I want to make a difference. And I know that it comes in cycle, but for as long as I live in this country, I am going to do my part to make a difference. I'm going to light my little candle in hope that others will do the same. And I'm not unclear as to my thoughts on structure of government, who come to government and what they should do, how they should conduct themselves, how the responsibility of government to citizen must be discharged. I have very strong views on those matters, shaped over time by experience, by data, by research, by interaction, and by a lived experience in this country and elsewhere.
Having regard to that, though, Minister, I take your point about stepping up and putting your money where the mouth is, so to speak. But where we are, we're talking about today in particular, a state of justice which seems to have police officers who are to be the persons who investigate and to charge and to arrest. Many questions surrounding them and the reform process and the delay in having that reform process. And there are some of us who believe that whilst change doesn't come overnight,
It's too slow.
It's too slow.
I
And
share
because
the
it is as slow as it is, the violations continue to rise because we're not doing enough to keep the police, who are arbiters of great power, in check.
I don't know that it is factually correct, though, to say that violation by the state of the guaranteed rights of citizens are on the rise. I would dispute that.
I say that in the context, Madam Minister, because remember when we started this presentation, we did mention that there were at least 600 reports of violations. Now, the validity or the veracity of it may not have been tested, but what I want to focus on is the reality that there are complaints, significant complaints, about the manner in which the police carry out their duty. And there is no disputing that they are the great, well, I use the word great, but they are the architects of many of the violations that we complain about. How do we hasten effective and efficient police reform? That seems to me, to my mind, and this is just my opinion, one of the ways in which we can handle the current crime rate and balance the rights that are envisaged in our Constitution.
So, again, I part company with the statement that in the use, in the policing, the exercise of policing powers and other powers in dealing with a crime, certainly in recent times, that you have seen an increase in complaints. Complaints are always high once the police attempts to enforce the law. And we do have proven cases of excessives, which we really don't want to go there. But the data that I'm working with, and I'm also on the ground as a member of parliament, doesn't support it. But it is still high. But it is nowhere where it used to be. Let's be clear about that. And JFJ has played a role in that, because even the training that has been normalized on the human rights fronts is part of the work that you have done. When a zone of special operation is declared, when an SOE, those officers who are deployed, they do undergo some additional training in the process. The public may not know it, but it is a fact. And that has made a huge difference in how they interact with the citizens in areas. Bear in mind, that there are criteria, legal criteria, that must be met before any of these triggers are pulled in relation to what is happening in a particular locale on the ground. And there usually is no dispute around that. The competition is whether that is the tool you use or another one. So, I mean, let me be clear that we still have a long way to go. And I share concerns. I share the concerns. And where I am, part of my responsibility is to make progress on these problems to the extent that the state has responsibility for it. But we also have an law-abidingness in this country. Everybody wants to do what they want to do, how they want to do it, when they want to do it, and nobody must chat to them. That's a reality in this country. And many times, our focus, we are slow, and pardon me, it's among the lens through which I look at it. We are uneven in our call. And this is not to say that you must be relentless where the state is concerned. But we are uneven in our call, and a lot of the problems start in a different place that we have not yet mustered up the courage to look at in the homes. And small acts, it is my view, tested by the data, that wrongdoing doesn't start at the level of criminal wrongdoing of breaking the law. It's the little things that go unattended, unresponded to, then allow persons to be emboldened, thinking they're bigger than a system, or they're bigger than the family, they're bigger than the unit, and then it escalates up. Same way in the state of public order, the disorder that you see, whether it's in just dropping, disposing of the garbage, urinating where you want, breaking the line and driving how you want, and then it emboldens them, the level of impunity that exists, and it goes all the way up right across the society.
I think you're onto something, Madam Minister, and I take it to Commissioner, former Commissioner. Do you think we make too much of making a distinction between minor crimes and major crimes? Since, in light of what the Minister has said, wrong is wrong.
I've always held the view that criminality thrives in an atmosphere of disorder. Disorder on the roads, disorder in the public spaces. Criminality thrives within that environment. Now, we must never lose sight of the fact that policing in Jamaica is a very, very dangerous undertaking. Not many of us would want to be a police officer or would encourage our children to be police officers under the current terms and conditions of service and the environment in which they have to work. But we need the police, and we need professional policing. We have developed this thing where we talk about hard policing and soft policing, and we have a debate about it. And I've always maintained that there's no such thing as hard policing or soft policing. The one thing we need is professional policing. And professional policing is policing that is as hard as you need to be and as soft as you're required to be to get the job done within the law. Simple. That is what we need. Now, we have carefully nurtured, probably over the last 70 years, pre-independence, some of the issues we are facing now, which have only manifested themselves, and it is the weapons that have changed, And we need not go back over the whole history about how we got here. The minister made a few good points. We're not going to get out of it overnight, but there are some immediate things that need to be done. Cauterize the problem. And that is largely a police issue, a security forces issue, to cauterize the problems. We have differences, Madam Minister, as to how we do it. And I am one of those who say the SOE is not the way. But I don't want to open that debate here. No, because I'm going to go on too long.
What would be your alternative, though?
Pardon?
Because you've opened the door. What would be your alternative to the SOE?
We could have done what we did in Montego Bay without a declaration. The only thing we could not do was to detain people for the periods that we have done and suspend habeas corpus.
But doesn't the detention work?
Well, look, my view is that there was a theory behind it. No one in the security forces have explained this to me, but I kind of worked that out. If within the community you removed the bad eggs and some of the suspects, the hope is that witnesses may have the confidence to come forward to give statements so that you could now go and charge those persons whom you have in custody because you feel safer. The question is, how many of such cases did we have in that first state of emergency in January 2018? And based on those results, which were not good, we should have known that, look, this is really not going to cut it. I have no problems with a state of emergency for the 2 weeks, if you want to go shock and awe, as they call it. But when it expires, let it expire. There are many operational measures that can be implemented that have better value than a state of emergency, which, as I warned, has turned out to be a farce.
What kind of operational measures, though, for those of us who are unfamiliar with the options?
Well, let's work at one. Let's work at one strategy here now. Do we all agree that one of the problems is that criminals are moving around too freely? Do we agree? Mm-hmm. Yes. So we need a strategy that says we must cut down on the free movement of criminals without being challenged.
How you do that?
Hold on, man, I'm going there. The tools that you have in the box.
You know I'm going to interrogate you.
The tools, I welcome it. The tools that you have in the box are finite. There's no magical tool. So we must not look for it to find a new commissioner who's going to come with some bright. It does not exist. It is how you use the tools that you have in combination. So, we want to break up the space and the free movements of criminals throughout the country or an area. You can't do it by having some soldiers and police under a tent at a fixed point. You need to have mobile checkpoints. They drive around, stop, half hour here, stop, check, move around. The criminals must be kept off balance. They are thinking and we are not thinking. It's as simple as that. And we have got to be adaptable. So when we start to make some success, understand that they are going to adapt because they're highly adaptable. Don't wait for their new methodologies to take hold before we play catch up. Think it through. What are they going to do next? You see the recent successes of the wharf? They're going to move their method of importing weapons. Have we started to think clearly? Wow. 1 or 2 successes. They're going to move to some other means now. What will that be? We have in the security forces the leadership, the brains, to think through these things. But we must get out of some of the things we are just locked into, certain of the things we are doing. Think our way through it. Try new things and combination of things. That's one strategy. Cut down the space and the free movement that the criminal has. Notice nowadays, since the RMA and curfews, Did you notice a lot more murders are taking place in broad daylight? Ah, there you go. So, our operational measures have to take that into account. The kind of state of emergency and the things we have been doing, to me, is an abuse of good human resource. With those persons, it is human resource intensive. When you set up that state of emergency, or whatever operations you do in a particular area, there's a little station way up in the mountains called Millbank. It's in the farthest of the farthest place, a police station. Does the police in Millbank know that there is something big going on? And in Millbank, my quiet community, I must be, wow, I better keep on the lookout for strange faces. People may come here and take refuge. It has to be everything. Right now, the law-abiding government, everybody, we need a victory because we're having a crisis of confidence. Confidence in the security forces, probably confidence in ourselves in getting this right. Here's a good place to start. Deal with the mayhem on the road. Deal with that to bring back some sense of confidence in ourselves that, look, we can do something and get it right. I was heartened when Peace Step was formed, move in the right direction. When I heard 40 bikes roared out, I said, yes. And 2 weeks later, where were they? Where were they? I travel the Red Hills Road. It's madness.
I think our audience does agree with you.
It's madness. Let's deal with that. Deal with that. It was a little thing, you know. It is a big thing now. But it is something that is immediate. How often have you been sitting at a traffic light? Police vehicles across there. And you see a taximan does the most egregious law breaking. And you said, yes, I'm gone now. Nothing happens. Why? Because the policeman sitting in there is not in the traffic division. That's a job for the traffic division. So there has to be a mindset, which is a force multiplier in the police. That first thing I am is a police officer, and I enforce all laws. I just happen to work at Marine Division or Telecom. It is a force multiplier. That is what we need to energize as a first step to start showing we can start to deal with it. It's only a start. Hold on now, hold on. I don't want the impression to be given.
You did say.
I don't want the impression to be given that nothing is happening. There are some medium, long-term things that are being dealt with. The minister spoke to the investment that's been put into this, I say security forces because I thought a disproportionate amount went to the military. I'm happy for them, but the police is our primary law enforcement agency. Maybe there's something I don't understand. But the investment is going in. Some technology, even though I caution about technology, there's a big thing about body cameras. Now, I'm sorry, I'm not overly hot on body camera. I think it's police's attitude we need to start dealing with, which is the first thing, because you can defeat body cameras. Attitude. I stop there.
Professor, just before we round out, you wanted to interrogate. Can you do that in a short time?
You see, I think Red Admiral was right to say, let's not open that box. That's a different conversation, right? So I'm going to hold to that, right? What I will add that, yes, there are some opportunities for confidence building type wins that Harley just spoke about. And I think too many opportunities are going a begging. And yeah, we should seize some of them. Some has to do with the disorder in the public square, the traffic and so forth. Yes, I'd love to see that. But we cannot avoid focusing on how to deal with this loss of life issue, this murder problem. I'm heartened by some of what I see with the work that CTAC is doing, but CTAC needs to be multiplied fivefold. And what they're doing right there needs to be replicated right across the investigative function of the force. So yes, there are some building blocks and there are some opportunities.
Commissioner Fortnell, your
Indeed.
comment?
Well, in listening to the conversation, I've observed that we have looked at, I'm not sure I'm giving you the right quotation, Madam Moderator, but in terms of little offenses, big offenses. Now, what we're encouraging law enforcement to do, in 2017, INDICOM had released a report with recommendations to the law enforcement body with regard to discipline of officers. When you're a law enforcement body, just as a class prefect has a moral obligation to behave at a higher standard than your students, a pastor is expected to function at a higher standard of moral behavior than the congregation. Likewise, there's a duty on law enforcement to function in a manner which goes beyond those who you enforce the law. And I am saying that of police reports, 1,098 complaints, 300 plus have to do with assaults. 1,000 and approximately 96 recommendations for discipline, and up to 2022, none of those disciplinary processes had come to a conclusion. And to be complete, one of the matters was part heard, but none had come to a conclusion. I am saying the law enforcement bodies have to take, for example, 300 plus complaints of assault seriously. If the police force or any law enforcement body takes assault seriously, then eventually the persons will appreciate the value of life itself.
Fair enough, Commissioner. Final words to you, Madam Minister, as we round out our panel discussion.
I certainly agree with Professor Harriet that the former commissioner has opened a box that this forum, time and place, will not allow us to explore all of the issues. But if I can be candid without it being held against me, just thinking that Rear Admiral and the current Commissioner of Police share a history in that they were both Chief of Defense Staff and moving on to Commissioner of Police. And so it's just interesting. As I listened out, sometimes when I hear views being brought to bear on issues, you can almost get the impression that all of the solutions are known outside of the system. And when you actually are in office, it's as if you're hamstrung in bringing the solutions to bear, because it's only after you demit office that you get a clearer view of what needs to be done.
You're opening another door. You might be opening another door, Minister. So, but let us not.
I've always been clear.
but just to say that
Careful now, Minister.
I'm always careful,
You might open a door and we don't have the time.
I'll send her some correspondence.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, look. I couldn't help but smile that Jamaica is just such an interesting place where our democracy is healthy, and our freedoms are many, the freedom of expression, all of it. I would say that without a doubt, we have huge problems, without a doubt. The problems are multifaceted. I think one of the reasons why we're getting a better understanding of them is because many things have been unmasked. You know, a lot of things lured in the background, below the surface, and many have been unmasked. And they tell you that in the process of change, sometimes things appear worse while you're on the road to getting better. I'm going to take courage in the fact that we can convene like this and we can exchange perspective on this important matter. I strongly hold the view that governments should be held to account. I am of the view that citizens should be held to account. I have a bias towards law enforcement and matters of justice, and I learn every day. When I listened to the extended perspective shared by Rear Admiral Lewin, I couldn't help but again feel grateful for having come to this role after serving in both houses of parliament on both sides of the aisles. And I wish I knew some of the things then when I was responding to issues that I know now. Because when you are outside of an institution, you really don't have the information that is inside that you're working with and on which you're making decisions. And that always should cause us to probe a little more and be less hasty in drawing conclusions. But we have our work cut out for us, and I think all of us have a role to play in it. I know that we have a lot of talent in Jamaica. I know that Jamaicans are passionate about Jamaica. And I believe that we, you know, as slow as it is and as painful as it is, we are making progress. But I do share the view that it's just hard to wake up every day to the news of the horrible murders, the horrible killings, the horrible crimes taking place in the homes among people who should be looking out for each other, and what it is doing to us as a people. But the government that I am a part of is working. You may not, others may have a different view, and we measure progress. And we're prepared to listen to the people. We're prepared to look and look again at how we are doing what we're doing, and work together to find meaningful solutions and to make greater progress on the problems in a shorter time. And to make greater progress on the problems in a shorter time.
In a shorter time. I wish I could get a time frame for when police reform will be complete.
Well, I can tell you on one aspect of it, we have a new bail law that is quite advanced, and will deal with some of the troubling issues around powers of detention, etc. And it by May, we should be coming out with
Well, we'll
it.
take the small steps, Minister. Thank you.
Well, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a
With one
step,
step,
you
indeed.
know. So as long as we're making progress and we're going in the right direction, I will be encouraged by that.
Thank you to all of you for this snapshot. We clearly have touched on an area that is multifaceted. Many ideas, contending views have to contend, but you gave us insight. So Commissioner Faulkner, former Commissioner Admiral Llewellyn, thank you so much for joining. Professor, always a pleasure to listen to you. And Madam Minister, I know you got to the door and you turned back and you stayed with us. Thank you so very much. We trust you enjoyed the presentation of views. If you have any questions, do you have any questions? Feel free. The minister is here. We may never get this opportunity again. We have a floor of the academics, the experts. Go ahead. Could somebody perhaps share a mic with him so we could get this question?
Good morning. I'm Tyrone Edwards, and I came here straight from the coroner's court. So myself and my family are currently on one of those journeys that starts with that single step. Now, I came in late, but I heard some of the discussion that is taking place. But my experience so far with the justice system has left me having a very difficult time believing that it will work for the common Jamaican. I feel like the system and is meant to hold us back. I have been at a hearing, a preliminary trial, where administrators in the court forgot that there would be a hearing. At the coroner's court, I expect that there is a specific procedure that should be followed when starting an inquest. And to find out, luckily, because we have representation from JFJ, that this is the procedure in terms of how witnesses are supposed to be called to give their deposition. And the inquest basically was adjourned because it's as if there was more of a need to close a case, to make a statistic, than to pursue finding the answers to the questions that we have. I want to know what our current government and lawmakers really plan to do to make the regular Jamaican who has experienced injustice at the hands of those that we expect should be there to protect us from the criminals, right? Myself and my family have been treated as criminals. The many things that has happened since the incident from 2014 until now. It takes somebody that is grounded in something more than just it takes religion, faith, to be holding on to that hope that eventually you will get some form of justice. But that is getting real thin. So what are the plans, Madam Minister, for making it easier for those that don't have the influence to actually feel like they too have a voice?
Are you talking about in the coroner's court, Tyrone, or generally?
In general, because, as I said, if I am to go through the experiences that I have had, we need more than just these few minutes.
Well, I agree with that. I think we have a lot of emotions and a lot of experiences on both sides that would take some time for us to unpack. But in the short time that we do have, Madam Minister, the question was geared towards the government.
Tyrone, please accept my sympathies. I can only imagine how difficult it is to experience a death in your family and looking for closure. And, it's dragging on and on. I've sat as a coroner because I spent over approximately a decade and a half between being a prosecutor and a trial judge in the parish courts, and I've exercised coroner's duties. And I know firsthand the challenges in the coroner's court. And again, I couldn't help but remember when I took the stance, when I was then on the bench, that matters would not be adjourned unless there were compelling circumstances. How I was slapped left, right, and center, back and forth, plastered all over the newspaper, and a perspective given, simply because I understood that when matters are placed in the system, they must be taken to conclusion. I do not have responsibility for the courts, but I will have a discussion with Minister Chuck. I will hear what is happening. I know there is a huge backlog of matters. I'm of the view that if you have greater control over the state witnesses, i.e. the police witnesses, and every case will have to be assessed on its own circumstances, I don't find it acceptable that matters move from one day to the next because witnesses do not turn up or whatever. I would need to know more about the particular circumstances of your case, but I do appreciate that if the death occurred in 2014, and we're now in 2022, it's been a long time. I also know there are longer matters. So you say that you're aided by JFJ. I will hear a little more about the particular case, but beyond your particular case, there is a systemic issue that needs to be addressed. I will raise it with the minister and see what can be done. I don't think the single court is enough to hear the matters in a timely way, and it may require the establishment of additional coroner's court, an assessment of the state of the backlog, looking on what is causing the delay, and then addressing those issues. So tackling delay in the courts is not a simple matter. From the time a matter goes in, there are any of many reasons that can cause delay, and no single element in the court can bring a hearing to conclusion. So even if the judge turns up and is ready and the other parties are not, even if the witnesses are there, it's a matter that requires counsel to be represented. If the person, the persons whose conduct is being inquired into, they also have rights. It's a number of areas. But I do know that matters can be done better. I presided in a court that was at the bottom of the rung, and when I left it, there was no backlog in it by whatever standard that you measure backlog over the years that I sat there. So I know it can be done. You have to be prepared to take the slaps, but people fall in line eventually, starting promptly, doing assessment of the court, the state of the file, making contact with the witness. I remember the first time I issued a warrant of arrest for a superintendent of police. Everybody came crashing down on me, and I said, I will not explain it. It is what the law says, and no officer, regardless of where they stand. If you are supposed to be in court and you're bound over to be here, and I do not get an excuse as to why you're not here, you are going to be brought here. So there are different things that can be done. I don't know. I mean, I do have very detailed understanding of the justice system because of my own experience professionally. But so sorry. I hear your pain. I really am sorry. And I know the saying so will do very little until you get to the result of the completion and the closure. But I will speak to you.
We come back to where we began, because you will recall I did raise the issue with you, Madam Minister, about the coroner's court. Gentlemen, as distinguished as you are, thank you so very much for joining. Madam Minister, thank you again. We'll take a little break from the conversations and entertain you now, so you get a little reprieve of the magnificent performance that we have. We have one quick question? Sure. One quick question.
All right, good afternoon. Madam Minister, I think this one is for you also. Talking about justice for all, I heard that and I retain that, for all. And as one person said, it should be, and I think I said it somewhere before, even the Prime Minister, Governor General should fall under justice for all. Now, my case is the Mario Dean case. And 2014, same way. In the manner in which my son was killed, I was expecting that that case would easily go through the courts. Not so. There are times I am in court and I believe that I am the accuser. My family or my son is the accused because how it's been treated. Right? We've been intimidated and everything. And as far as I'm saying, the accused have more rights than I am in there. I can't even speak, but they are able to say, well, I don't want the judge to try me. I want jury trial in a time like this. One here, another here. I'm going back to court next month, and Honestly, I don't even feel like going. Honestly, I don't even feel like going because of this thing, because coming out of court each time, I'm so enraged because I feel more like the accused.
Ms. Fraser, so, I know your matter arose out of St. James, where I'm one of the members of parliament. You have said so many, and one that will jump out sharply in this forum of the perception and your own experience of an accused seeming to have more rights than the victims, eh? We'll have to unpack that in another way. I don't know exactly where your matter is, but again, that one has left a black eye on all of us. And I really am sorry. I really am sorry, because I know pain is real. And even sometimes when we stand aside and we commiserate, we don't feel the depth of that pain as those who are impacted directly by it. It shouldn't be that you feel as if you are the suspect or the accused where you're seeking justice, in the same way that even those who are formally accused and being tried need to have their rights dealt with. Is it that you have a specific ask of the state? Because the courts operate independently, not administratively, but in the discharge of judicial functions from the executive. And the executive does not step in and direct a judge on how to exercise judicial discretion in the hearing of a matter. So we have to bear that in mind, that insofar as the conduct of proceedings go, it is the judge who presides and has responsibility for that and has tremendous powers around the hearing of matters and decisions that are taken. I don't know if there are issues of resources. I'm not sure what the details are. I followed your matter up to a certain point. I don't have the details at this time, but I'd be prepared to hear if there is anything that can be done from where I sit. I'd speak with the Minister of Justice. I know he also has a very sympathetic ears. But if it is anything to do with the conduct of the proceedings, then that would be outside of my hand. There is a chief parish judge who, along with the Chief Justice, have responsibility, but even so, every judge is a judge in his or her own right. And while the Chief Justice or the Chief Parish Court judge may have administrative oversight, they have no oversight in how the judicial discretion is exercised in determining what decision to take in the conduct of the proceedings.
Certainly get that information to you, Madam Minister, so you can have a look at it. You know, this is what happens when you open the door. I'm getting the time wrap signal. Commissioner Faulkner, you've got 2 seconds.
I cannot waste the opportunity. The Honorable Minister, who is a member of the executive, is here. Mr. Edwards has raised a matter touching on concerning the coroner's court. In DICOM, we relate to the special coroner, where the victims allegedly die at the hands of the state. Okay, right. So what I'm urging, Madam Minister, for you to be our envoy, is that the government lab has to be properly resourced so that the ballistics, chemistry and biology reports come out in a timely manner that will also impact the timeliness of the special coroner's court and the coroner's court. They have made improvements in terms of postmortems, and we acknowledge that. But sometimes you have reports that are final investigative reports, but you have to put a P, provisional final investigative report, because you're waiting on ballistic, you're waiting on chemistry, you're waiting on DNA, you're waiting on etc. And Madam, it would assist greatly in the speed of justice for the citizens of Jamaica.
Well, just to say that two of the subject matters reside out of the ministry that I head. The court would fall in justice and the laboratory in the Ministry of National Security, but both ministers and myself are part of the National Security Council, and we do have fora for discussion. We'll be happy to take it up and have further discussion
so I'll raise it at
on the
that
matter.
forum,
Please do.
Madam.
And you're in for the meeting later. It can also be raised there.
Indeed.
Yes.
We're getting something done. Action. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's take the break with the entertainment provided by Ashe just now.
People crying for justice. Everybody wants to know how this battle's gonna go.
We want peace in our community.
We want freedom from poverty.
We're tired of the baby blood on the wall. Real gangster living, no make it at all.
Oh no,
No,
oh no. Stand up. We're taking a stand for the life of my fellow man.
stand tall. Get the people put up on one, tall and strong.
Stand proud.
Stand proud for the life of all Jamaicans.
Taking a stand. We're moving hand in hand.
Say we want peace, peace that we love and what we want. When we look round dead body like leave just have
So
fun.
me ponder if you should me brother. Just know that tomorrow you're 6 feet under.
Get the youth right, do me make you put down the gun. Come in know one day we are gonna rise out of the slum.
Be wise.
And make the politics hypnotize your head substantial. Reach to the sky.
Baby blood on the wall.
Real gangster living, no make it at all.
Oh no.
No.
Oh no.
Hey.
Step in the shoes of your brother. Oh, you wanna feel? Man, them kill was your father. Where you wanna do?
Step in the shoes of your sister, yeah.
Oh, you wanna feel?
Then kill your mother by fire.
Where you wanna do?
Step in the shoes of the youth them on the corner. Cause when them hungry now, you're gonna feel it, yo. Do all you can do, you to understand. Cause I'm your sister, yo, and we're all family now.
Tired of the baby blood on the wall.
Real gangster living, don't make it at all.
Oh no.
No, no,
Oh no. Stand up. We're taking a stand for the life of my fellow man.
Get the people put up on one, tall and strong.
Stand proud.
Stand proud for the life of all Jamaicans.
Taking a stand. We're moving hand in hand. We're tired of the baby blood on the wall. Real gangster living, don't make it at all. Oh no.
No,
No. Oh no. Stand up. talk about justice.
Justice.
In Jamaica.
But we don't want to just talk. We want to trigger action.
Examining human rights.
Action, not a bag of mouth.
And the state of law in Jamaica.
Sweet action, action, not a bag of mouth.
Sweet action. So we're going to review,
Reflect,
inspire,
and recommend.
Review legal cases across the many spaces, including police abuse and killings, arbitrary arrest and detention,
persons living with and affected by HIV and gender-based violence.
reflect on the major policy and legislative issues from 2021, such as the Emergency Powers Act, INDICOM, and the National Human Rights Institution, among others.
inspire collaboration and partnership that influences policy changes based in human rights principles.
Provide clear recommendations and necessary amendments for police reform, crime-fighting measures, and other human rights challenges.
Everybody wants the same thing, don't they?
Don't they? Everybody wants a happy end.
They wanna see the game on Saturday.
They wanna be somebody's friend.
Everybody wants their family protected.
Oh, yeah.
We want shelter from the storm. We don't need to fight each other. What we need, solidarity.
From the beginning of time, the cry of justice has always been, am I not a friend or a brother?
Am I not a sister or a mother?
So what's good for the goose?
Is good for the gander.
Solidarity.
What we need. You know, one thing I know for sure, you can't sit on an ivory tower and decide who has rights and who does not. So unless everybody has rights, everybody is wrong.
Everybody is wrong. The world begins to end. The moment we become silent about the things that matter. Let's come together. Come together right now in unity. Come together right now in unity.
The whole world's coming together now.
Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Feel it in the air. The wind is taking it everywhere. Yeah. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? All the colors of the world should be loving each other wholeheartedly. Yes, it's all right. Take my message to your brother and tell him twice. Spread the word and try to teach him that he's hating his brother when hate won't do. 'Cause we're all the same. The blood inside of me is inside of you.
Now tell me, can you feel it?
Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it?
We need equal access to treatment for all.
We need equal access to treatment for all.
We need gender equality. We need to end violence against women, girls, and children.
We need to end violence against women, girls, and children.
We need to reform all laws that deny human rights.
We need to promote human sexuality, reproductive health, and reproductive rights.
So unless everybody has rights,
Unless everybody has rights, everybody is wrong. All the children of the world should be loving each other wholeheartedly. Yes, it's alright. Take my message to your brother, tell him twice.
Take the news to the march.
Take the news to the march.
Their brothers, but never do.
Cause we're all the same. The blood inside of me is inside of you.
now tell me, can you feel it? Tell me, can you feel it?
Can you feel
Hey,
it?
I'm talking to my brothers, I'm talking to my
Feel
sisters.
it?
Can you feel
Can
it?
you feel,
Can you feel it?
Every breath you take,
every breath you take?
so much better than another place.
Let's all breathe free.
Every healthy smile
My right
is
is your right.
shot to another child.
So let's all smile together.
But the stars will shine in promising salvation is near this time.
Justice is not just a concept.
Can you feel it now?
It's a reality.
So brothers
We
and
all
sisters,
must
shall
live
we know
together.
how?
Now tell me, can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Yeah. Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? Woo!
Can you feel it? Can you feel it?
Can you feel the joy?
Can you feel it?
This one, that's all. Yeah,
Open up your heart. Open up your soul. Open up your mind.
Feel the
Love, feel it. Love is in your heart. Love is in your soul. Love is in your mind.
Can you feel it?
Can you feel it? Can you feel it?
Father, you said excellent. And there's another fancy word, resplendent. In terms of the performance, they never disappoint. Thank you so very much, Ashe, for sharing with us. We certainly can feel it. There is a message. Challenge is, how do we get that out to everyone else so that they can feel it too? And it is in that vein that we're going to be joined now by persons who have had that experience. The challenges that we spoke about this morning. We're going to be hearing voices from our communities. We're going to be joined by Herman Ray, Mercia Fraser. I believe we heard from her when we spoke with the minister a few moments ago. They'll join us now for what we have described as voices in our community, to hear from them, an update as to where their matters are, and perhaps an insight into what lessons they have learned. Tyrone, I think you're going to be joining us as well. Have a seat, have a seat. Make yourself welcome. Chemo Dakers and Zewade Mason. Will you be here? Zewade, are you here?
I left the club about after 5 to 6 early in the morning. I wasn't going far from about just a 10-15 minutes walk away. So everyone left and I was there waiting in a cab. Saw a cab, found it down, went into the cab, not really paying attention, but the taxi driver asked for a little time for a turn off. Then after he entered a lane, he drove and he went through other place, and I didn't exactly know where I was, because after he left from that lane he went to a other part which is just one straight. Only thing I remember here is a gunshot, and I lift up my head because I was sitting in the back of the car. I heard the gunshot, the driver ran off. There was another man there, he ran off that was in the cab. I was still sitting in the back because I was panicked and I didn't know the place. So to run was a no-no to me, plus I wasn't sure of what taking place. at the time. What happened, so the police, Juve come down the lane, took me out of the car. By the time he took me out of the car, he asked, what am I doing down here? I said, I take a cab. The driver said he gone to left a small note with his girlfriend. So he begged me a little time and I'm waiting on him. Before I know it, a box put me to the ground. Some other set of police was searching the vehicle at the time. While it was the other police dealt with me at the moment, there's not everything that I can remember because I had a tragic abuse. I got stamped in my chest, head, back, kicked to my stomach. So they took me from the crime scene. They didn't bring me to the station. They took me straight to my girlfriend's house. They said it's not my place. Beat me again in front of my mother-in-law and family member. After that, they took me to the station. After they took me to the station in Kingston, they put me in the holding area with the driver because they took me and the driver to the station and the car I was in. After 2 minutes to 5 minutes in the station, they let go the driver, release him. Knowing they have found a firearm in the car under the driver's seat. The driver is gone, but I'm still in custody. So I'm like, I'm not a criminal. So I told the police to check my background, check my files. I have my manager, I have a set of people I've worked with. So he didn't listen none of my opinions. He went straight ahead, charged me for illegal possession of firearm. I was locked up. I had a lawyer, a paid lawyer at the moment. He attended 2 first attempt at court. After that, I'm not see back, not more of him, and that's about after 4 or 5 court case calls. Normally when I go court or before I go court, he would come a day before for talk to me, and when I go court, he would like talk to me inside the court or explain all the nature of the case and what's going on. So I realized I haven't been seeing him. So I asked the judge for a lawyer, told her that I can't afford a lawyer at this moment due to spending a fund and try to keep my household, my family contact. It's more than satisfied, I would say, because when you have someone to correspond to your every details without acting as if they are the one feeling or in the position you are in change of the police force, the system itself, we need more from the government. I mean the government, the Prime Minister, and the Governor General. Because police are here to serve and protect. If you have criminal, gangsters treating you away and the police treating you the same, what are you going to do? There's no one to run to. So there's no way a police officer have the right to tell me who I am without investigate. There's no investigate happen in Jamaica. They charge, discriminate, and then investigate. They don't investigate and then come and charge you. Somebody can just go to the station and say, you know, say John Tama, him kill a man there. If police in favor with the person, them come take you up. Whether knowing that is not you or you, them prefer you suffer 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years behind bars. When 7 years, 5 years, they might find out the innocent. Well, it makes sense. And you don't take 5, 7, 8 years out of my life already, and then you're going to say I'm innocent. You throw me right off the grid. I'm not a human being. Where should I start when so much out of my life have been taken? What if I do have kids? How my kids survive?
That is often the expression made.
Early Sunday morning, 2018, I was left.
When we interface with individuals who are experiencing, as he has properly described it in his own words, as you discriminate. And he's raised that concern, which many persons have raised, about our lack of investigations. But it's always more impactful to hear from persons right before you. You see them all the time. You hear their names on the radio. You see tidbits, information, publications being shared about their own experience. to get from them their own sense of what has the process taught them, if it has taught them anything. How have they managed to get through the process? And that's where we're going to go in this second panel rather, for the afternoon. Mr. Herman Ray, I want to start with you. You're the father of Fabian Ray.
Yes.
And
Good afternoon.
Fabian was walking home alone in the Haney Park when a vehicle transporting 2 policemen stopped him. The officers asked Ray what he had on him. He lifted his shirt several times and responded that he didn't have anything. An officer shot him, and when he collapsed, they stood over him and fired several more rounds at him as he cried for help. After he died, he was removed from the scene by the officers as his dad.
Yes, I'm Fabian's father. Yes.
You were asked to share with us this morning. The case is closed now.
Yes.
Where are you mentally in all of this?
Mentally, I'm just trying to survive. You know, I'm just asking God just keep me, because it has been a long process and nothing comes of it. Because let me explain to you, Fabian Ray, October 21st, 2008, he was killed by the police. I get to understand that it was a mistaken identification. Anyhow, when he was ill by the police and got killed, the evening when I heard the news, they said that Fabian, they accosted their man and point a gun at them, and so they shot him. It took us 5 years later to get a hearing in the coroner's court. The ballistic was drawn, it was drawn out deliberately. Because I understand it was a clear-cut case. A group of lawyers took up the case and they said it was a clear-cut case, especially for one of the witnesses that viewed the incident.
The difference, though, Mr. Ray, was that when your case was closed, no witnesses came forward.
No witnesses, because I understand they were allegedly threatened by the police.
And it's important to use those words, allegedly, including of when you said allegedly,
yes,
that it was deliberately drawn out, because we really don't have evidence of that.
Yes.
But the reality is that Section 14 of the Coroner's Act allowed them to dispense with your matter on the basis that they had no information.
Right.
They weren't able to have a proper inquest, so to speak. No information could be uncovered, and so that was how your matter came to an end. So,
yes,
like I commenced this morning, the issue of the coroner's court. Important because it's not just because it's an inquest and it's not really a trial, but it is the place where many of our families who experience violations of the greatest kind, ending in the death of their loved one, has to go to have a court rule whether or not it was murder or it was manslaughter. In the absence of that, no charges can be laid. And this takes me to you, Mr. Edwards, Tyrone. You shared with us this morning about your own physical, literal experience this morning going to the coroner's court. You heard the response of the minister, and she's given you her assurance that she will make some inquiries. Is that enough for you?
It wouldn't be, because unless you see action, it really is just words to try and comfort you. We need action to go along with the words. So until there is
until you see the action.
Until there is action, then we can believe. So it's like saying, I promise that I will get you something. And promises are made to be broken.
So we'll hold the minister to account for that, but it certainly speaks to a greater issue, the speed at which reform is done and the effectiveness of the reform in ensuring that regular citizens can feel that justice is being done, even if it is that you have to face the loss, you understand what the process is, what is going through, and you feel that there's a semblance, somebody understanding. And it's not just your lawyer, it's also the system itself that should reflect that understanding. Still on the coroner's court, Ms. Fraser, you also raised questions to the minister. You felt that given the national prominence of your matter, that the journey through court would have been swift. It was not. We heard you in your expression to the minister. Share with the audience, having gone through all of this, what lesson have you learned?
All right, good afternoon. You know, before my experience, I used to watch television and see all these cases, and be honest with you, I sit here, I never said, you know, I never really quarreled with people and said, you know, they're making noise, but I always sometimes look at it and I said, I wonder how much of this is really true. I always sit and wonder, because looking at the police and you're saying they are there to uphold life, they are there, you know, anything you run to them. So it's all of this. If each time I see one, I keep asking, is this really for real? All of this is true until it knock on my door. When it knock on my door and I see everything, even when I heard that my son was, when I get the call that he was locked up, within 2 hours after I get the call, I get another call, he was in the hospital. And I was saying, no, not him. And with all of that, I keep insisting it can't be him because he's with the police. To me, he's in the station, he's with the police. It couldn't be him. So it's a real turnaround, and going through court, even from the hospital, being intimidated and going through that, I have a different look. And each time I sit and I look, and you know, the police is there and the gunman is there, because right now in Montego Bay flare up where I'm from. And if something should happen and to run, which direction I run to, because I ain't running to the police. And I know they are good police, but I don't know the good ones, different from the bad ones.
So you're confirming what has been shared in our panel this morning, the crisis of confidence.
Crisis.
So you're caught between two real Rottweilers, two people, two dogs, and you don't know where you go for protection. Whether you run from one or run to the other.
I am right now.
In real terms.
Where do I go?
Yes.
So in the light of all of this, and I talked to, you know, Madam Ford, the police system needs more than just training, putting on the street. Psychological problem is the biggest one with them, and that needs to be dealt with.
One of the things that we should share with our audience, though, coming out of your matter, it's one of the special matters of JFJ, in the sense that it was able to proceed without a witness. And that was because the lawyers at JFJ were adamant that there was cause to have the inquest being done. It was a matter of interest of justice, and they are able to conduct the inquest without the presence of a witness. Doesn't that give you some confidence in the justice system?
Confidence in the justice system?
I did ask that. The confidence that, unlike Mr. Ray's matter, where it was closed because he had no witness.
You know,
yours could go on in the absence of a witness.
Yes. That doesn't mean it gives me more of confidence in them. It's just the state that what my son's case was just a little different.
Right.
And my son's case happened in the police station. And the light it gets, that's just gives me that little advantage over them.
So the publicity for your matter gave you an advantage. It's not so much confidence in the system.
It's not so much confidence in the system.
Appreciate. Certainly, Mr. Ray.
We had witnesses, you know. The sworn statement was signed by witnesses.
But they didn't turn up.
They didn't turn up. Because I said allegedly they were threatened by the police.
Yes.
So they're scared.
Understood.
And the amount of time it took to get before the court.
Yes.
Witnesses were relocated.
Exactly, that's what going
on. So the duration of time it takes through the courts affects the availability of witnesses, which I think
delayed,
justice denied. That is something that has been said in several quarters. The challenge is going to be, as Madam Minister had articulated, how do we reform the system so that we reduce the delays in it. But we are crunching for time, and I intend to close out exactly at 1. I want to hear from Mr. Ray. You wanted to add something?
No, I was saying that they could reform the system that as long as the witnesses sign sworn statement, they could go ahead with the trial.
You're going to have many challenges with that. The Evidence Act does allow for witness statements to be submitted at this time. So in terms of reform, that's already in existence.
Okay.
The challenge we have with that, speaking from a legal perspective, is how do you challenge somebody who is not there?
Okay.
So when you put in the statement, can you ask them certain questions for clarity? And of what value is that statement if you can't test what is said in the statement? So the Act does allow for it to go in. The challenge we're going to have is whether or not you can really use it now to say that the person is guilty. And there are options that are available in terms of looking at the things that may arise in the statement may be some cause for concern, but that already exists. And perhaps we would be better suited hearing from the attorneys why that approach wasn't taken.
Yes, sir.
But we want to close out, and one of the fundamental concerns we've had here at JFJ is about the impact of the state of emergency. And the evidence is quite clear as to the persons who are most impacted by the implementations of the state of emergency. And we wanted to share with you this afternoon the experience of 2 young men on their take as to what had happened to them. Chemo takers, I think it is. Chemo?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Do you remember how long you were in custody for?
Yeah. Get locked up for a week.
For a week?
Yeah.
What was it like?
Totally hell, me I tell her. I swear.
Were you charged?
No charge. Them just lock me up. Tell us that them I investigate. Them swab my fingernail. Lot of things them do, and them my mother and my brother get lawyer and so them come up to the station and talk to the police them and ask them why they lock up and thing. Them tell them say it under investigation and so we have to wait and see what's up. Them tell me say them are gonna release me the Thursday. But we never get released the Thursday, so the lawyer have to come up there back and come talk to the police them and such or some get.
You remember the date?
You know, in 2020. You know.
2020.
Yeah.
And they haven't come back to you since.
Oh no. But
Has being detained, has that affected you as an individual, as a man, as a young man?
yeah, a lot. But it have pushed me certain way too, cause it make me take on into my music more, cause I do music, you know. Yeah. But otherwise, not a good look for young youth, you know. To get locked up and justice system to it not right. It's not ready yet for real, it's not ready.
But you had the benefit of an attorney. Wasn't that an advantage to you?
Yeah, but suppose we never have the benefit of them. With that, maybe we would do on the road today, with in lock up same way or something. I don't know.
So Wendy, your experience, what was it like for you? Tell our audience, how long were you detained for?
1 month, I guess. Yeah, I was in my bed when the police them take me out. And my baby mother was sleeping, and about another 5 o'clock bells, like them raid the community, search yard to yard, and take me out of my house, go in a couple more yard, take out few more man. Then them said them go question we carry our own spear. Then them said them can't take away there, so then them bring we go out to our next part. Be a circle till them end up carry out doing the park. Then them say somebody want to talk to we. Look after them say again some anti-gang thing. Anti-gang. Yeah. So me I say, what you mean anti-gang? I ain't no come see me in a gang or nothing. I mean, my baby mother you say asleep. So kind of gang you put me in a. Then,
Were you ever charged?
No, we never
No,
charged.
never charged.
No.
And you spent a month detained while they did their investigations.
Yeah, and all four of us, and Lego 2 in space a week.
Right.
And me and the next local youth, them have for about a month. We ask them what go on. Them are glad tell we say them come talk to we, them come talk to we, and no, me not see
Were
them
you
come.
released because of the assistance of an attorney?
Yeah.
And what's the impact on that to you now? How do you feel about it?
I don't really feel good because I got my son them, and I don't really want them to grow up and see me behind the bars and everything there. So I try to stay far enough from certain things where to put me behind the bars.
Has
from
it
them.
made you change how you've been living? Has it inspired you to be different?
No, I've been living different before.
Mm-hmm.
But as you may tell you, them want change back my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Make me a pray a different way, because if them just come take me out of my house for no reason at all, it's not like I do something. Them just say them a search and then them start about anti-gang. Yeah. And I know me not say nothing.
And that's the common cry. Being taken up, not being charged, not having had a history of any kind of interaction, but perhaps because of where you are and the area in which you're at. We could go on with the heart-wrenching explanations, these stories from every single person who has had a run-in with the police, who've had a reason to call JFJ to speak about their violations. But the gist of being here this morning, and I thank you on behalf of the board of directors again for staying with us, is for you to appreciate the value of the annual report. A report that provides a holistic, comprehensive, and a succinct approach to the varying issues that touch and concern the state of justice here in Jamaica. It adequately, to my mind, and I would refer it to you, encourage you to have a look at it. It raises the issue of human rights violations and how the rule of law can be used to best protect them. Because we're keeping in time, I'll invite Father, because we are at that point where we have our closing remarks by Reverend Father Sean Major Campbell at this time.
It's all right. I think I can just stay here. No? Oh. No, I don't want.
You don't want to hide?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, wonderful for us to be here. Justice for one, justice for all. And indeed, we want to encourage persons to develop an even greater appreciation for this annual justice review. We'll not be talking long with you at all, just a few comments. But what would this day have been without all of you? And so I really thank you for being the great audience that you have been. Certainly it was wonderful to hear from Madam Executive Director, Sister Michael Jackson, yes, did a wonderful job. Her team, we should give them a big round of applause. It was also wonderful, great to hear from Honorable Marlene Malahoo Fort, who acknowledged the obligation with regards to a national institution for the protection of rights. Of course, in accordance with JFJ's concerns, reconstitutional review, we still maintain that we would want to see us doing away with capital punishment. It was absolutely great to also hear the case analyses, because at JFJ we believe in working with the information and the evidence afforded by data. So Ms. Ornella Kelly, our monitoring, evaluating, and research officer, we thank you. The panel discussion, that was wonderful. Great to have had the panel discussion. And our Indicom Commissioner, Mr. Hugh Faulkner, our former Commissioner of Police, Rear Admiral, I think the last time I saw you was on a flight. Can you believe it? And that was, I think, 2007 or thereabout, heading to College of the Bahamas, but yes. Director of the Institute of Criminal Justice and Security, Professor Anthony Harriott, thank you so much. And of course, what a difference it makes when we have the availability of media to support the call and work of justice, Nationwide Radio, and any other representatives from media present. We thank you. The vibes of the audience, the questions, the voices from the community just now. Wow, what would this have been without their testimonials? Ashe, wasn't Ashe good? What an energy. Wow. I'm going to ask after our next board meeting if Jamaicans for Justice could make sure that we find some way of employing them full time. Yes. So, Madam Moderator, Attorney at Law Daniel Archer, what a wonderful job. Great. And as I listened to everything, I couldn't help but saying to myself, and certainly when I heard the testimonials, the voices from the community, I said, Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady prepared us for this moment. Words, words, words. I'm sick of words. If you love me, show me. Very important. And so I close with some words from Frederick Douglass. Where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe. And against this background, we continue to lift high the call. Justice for one, justice for all. I thank you.